Hi, I'm Champa Gopalan. I'm a professor in the Department of Plant and Environmental Sciences at New Mexico State University. And I will be giving a talk on genetics and its impact on agriculture and medicine. And I'll be doing this talk for Academy for Learning and Retirement. And the dates are May 20th, 22nd, 27th, and 29th of this year. So let me just give you a brief description of what I do. I've been at New Mexico State for almost 27 years, and my passion is in the field of plant genetics. And I've been working in the area of plant genetic engineering with really the whole goal is to improve crop production, crop performance, but using genetic engineering tools. And so the talk that I will be giving will really emphasize the basic principles of genetics. I will start with my hero in life, Mendel, who really started the study of genetics. He didn't know what a gene was, but he was a mathematician, and his work was all based on experiments where he dealt with numbers. But he started the field of genetics, and even today, his principles are really the basics, or the basis for all the genetics that we do today. So I want to start with just answering the question of who we always say we are what our genes are. What does that mean? How does the information in a gene translate into what we are? Okay, we also talk about how we look like our father or a mother, or we have a combination of traits. And again, I'll go into that aspect as to how genes relate to characteristics. And then I want to go a little bit into how genetics really has influenced our day-to-day lives. So I will first talk a little bit about genetics in medicine and what a great impact it has on medicine. So actually in the future, I think the way we do medicine today is going to change completely. All kinds of treatment, etc., will really be based on genetics, on the genetic information, and we call it individualized medicine because the type of medicine that will be prescribed will be based on your genetic makeup. So this field is really moving very, very fast. And this new field, we call it genomics, where we deal with the genetic makeup. So, for example, you have all heard of the Human Genome Project. So the whole human genome is now known. And at this point, I want to tell you that genes chemically are nothing but this molecule called deoxyribonucleic acid, which is DNA. And I think all of you have heard of DNA. You also have heard of proteins. So the information is contained in the DNA, and it results in a protein, and proteins eventually determine characteristics. So the DNA makeup of every individual will be known. And again, I want to emphasize that a lot of disorders are due to what we call mutations, which are just natural mistakes that happen in the DNA molecule, and that translates into an abnormal protein that does not do its function and results in a disorder. So I'll go a little bit into that and the genetics of it, how it's inherited. Just because my dad has the gene or has that disorder doesn't mean I'm going to have or my children will have. So I'll go a little bit into the inheritance of traits or disorders, or to predict whether just because my dad has the genes, whether I will get it or my children will get it. Okay, so I will talk a lot about stem cell research, how stem cell research is going to be the basics of treating many disorders. I'll talk a lot about gene therapy, even though many people will say that gene therapy is playing God. But what is gene therapy? Gene therapy is, say for example, there is a disorder and we know what gene is responsible for it. And the reason we have the disorder is because the gene is defective. So if we now know what gene is defective, we can go and get the normal gene and insert it into that individual. Again, as I see, there are many people, many skeptics who think that it is not natural. But here we are being treated with insulin if we have diabetes, but insulin is produced by what we call recombinant DNA technology. And so if we can take insulin orally or by injecting, what is wrong in our body producing it even though we are inserting a foreign gene? So I want to go into what is involved in gene therapy and why we should be open to using it for treatments of disorders. I'll also go, because I'm a plant genetic engineer, I'll talk a lot about what genetic engineering is and what is involved and what our ultimate goals are. Again, there are lots of skeptics who think of genetically modified organisms and think of it as unnatural. Okay, plant breeding. I would say that's not natural, because we take a plant from, say, Las Cruces and bring a plant from India and try to cross them. In nature, they would never have come together, and yet we accept plant breeding with no hesitation. What is genetic engineering? In genetic engineering, we take a gene which encodes for a protein that is responsible for a great trait, and we introduce it into plants. Yes, I can see some people are against taking, say, a bacterial gene and putting it into plants. But we, in our lab, work with plant genes back into plant genes. And so to me, there's really no difference between plant breeding and genetic engineering, because, and another thing that's great about genetic engineering is because we know what we are introducing into the plant. Whereas when we do breeding, we have no idea what genes are being introduced into the plant that we want to make. So I will go into what is involved in genetic engineering, what we want to accomplish, and then I'll let you guys decide if GMO is good or GMO is bad. In a rich country like ours, we don't worry about food, but in poor developing countries, it is a big thing. So for example, in many poor countries, children don't get enough of vitamin A, okay? And so if we could somehow make the rich food fortified in this vitamin, it would help the children. And so we have produced what's called the golden rice. And the golden rice has already had an impact on nutrition in developing countries. So some of the areas that I work on is working on agriculture in New Mexico. For example, we work on chili. We want to make chili resistant to disease, plant pests. The whole competition of New Mexico was one of the biggest growers of chilies. But now, because of disease and weeds and all, it's being grown in other countries, and we will lose that stature in the world's chili industry. And then we also work in, say, alfalfa. Our goal is to make alfalfa be complete with respect to amino acids. Now they're deficient in certain amino acids. We want them to be able to fertilize the soil, because they are able to capture the atmospheric nitrogen, and so we don't need to fertilize alfalfa. So if we could learn as to how alfalfa does that, we could transfer that trait to other plants. So we work a lot in that area. And overall, we work in legumes, in crops, and anything that can have a benefit on performance. So yes, a lot of my work is really focused in the lab, but what we learn, we hope, can be moved out into the real world. And we have started doing that. Again, one of the reasons I want to talk about is just to emphasize what genetic engineering is, what we learn from it. It's really sometimes trying to understand some of the basic principles of how things work. Yes, it may have applications, and hopefully we will be able to apply it. For example, biofuels is becoming a big field, and some of my research is focusing on how to make plants be efficient feedstock for biofuels. And I think that research will have a big impact. I can talk about other things, but maybe you can come to my talk and I will tell you the details of everything.
Thank you.